One thing that moves this channel forward, that really motivates me to make any content at all, is my infatuation with American history. And I learn a lot about how people, the really only way that I learn about how people react and receive the content that I produce comes through the comment section. Now, many times I have been tempted to turn off the comments on everything that I do because I don't have the time nor the interest to reply to all of it. I think it's really, at the end of the day, a very, very poor form of communication. I appreciate and really enjoy seeing comments from people who admire the work that we do here. But there is the occasional outlier. Some of those people are asking good questions, and they're genuinely interested in learning more about whatever the topic is that's being discussed. But for the most part, the negative comments are based in a very high degree of ignorance. And so I try not to take it too seriously. And when I take negative comments seriously, I tend to lash out. But I have learned, at least I hope I've learned, not to do that as much. Because I really don't think that many people who are making negative comments are doing it out of a position of knowledge, but rather they just don't know. They're ignorant. Now, one of the things that I have been criticized for long before I came on social media, long before I started making content, was that anybody who believes that the Confederacy had a legitimate reason for withdrawing from the Union is automatically in favor of slavery and automatically a racist. Well, I think that you need to realize that history is far, far more complex than that, because life is far more complex than that. Rarely in my adult life have I had a situation where it's either all one thing or all one other thing. If you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago if I believed in gray areas, I would have said no. And most issues in life are fairly much black and white. When it comes to certain issues, such as the very clear doctrine of the church, Jesus is divine. Jesus is the resurrected Lord. He is the way, the truth, and the life. There's no wiggle room on that. When we're talking about big divine issues like that, there is no wiggle room. It is very cut and dry. You either believe Jesus is who he said he was, or you don't. But when it comes to less important things, such as American history, you can't look at it like that. There's this, I do take a lot of the criticism personally. I mean, I'm not able to not take criticism personally. But the more you put yourself in the public eye, the more criticism is going to come. But now I just want to address a couple of issues very forthrightly. The assumption that some people are making is that I think that slavery was a good idea and that the Confederacy had slavery first and foremost in mind. No. General Robert E. Lee did not believe that the institution of slavery was a good idea, and yet he fought for the Confederacy. I am not a fan of slavery, especially in the way it came to exist in this country. Slavery existed throughout world history in various contexts. What makes American slavery somewhat unique is that it's one of the only, if not the only, context in which it was race-based. There were no white slaves in the American South. There were Indian slaves at one time. I'm thinking immediately of the Yamasee War in the Low Country, South Carolina in the early 18th century. But there were never any white folk European slaves in the South. And so I don't think it was a good idea. But you people who are blaming me for defending slavery because I think the Confederacy had a legitimate reason to exist, I would beg you to read more history. Read Jefferson Davis's inaugural address, Montgomery, Alabama, in early 1861. Read his inaugural address. He outlines better than anybody I've ever known, better than any document, better than any person in American history who has ever explained the reason why the South withdrew from the Union. Jefferson Davis did it better than anybody. And he should know. He didn't want to be the president of the Confederacy. He wanted to be in the military. But everybody in the South knew that he was the best man for the job. You had some people that didn't like him, but they were in the very extreme minority. And what does Davis refer to repeatedly in that first inaugural? He referred to the founding generation of the United States. The God of our fathers. He made a very clear point that connected 1861 to 1776. When you're studying history, it's oftentimes difficult to figure out what you're for and what you're against. Now, the professional historian is told that it's not your job to be for or against something. Well, within American history especially, there's no such thing as objectivity. You are coming to the topic with a preconceived notion of what is right and what is wrong. And sometimes those notions are absolutely right because they come from something deeper than the source material. So it's possible to say that, the South had a legitimate reason for secession. And at the same time say, I don't think slavery was a good idea. And what aggravates me are the people on social media who can't see that difference. They can't see it. And I shouldn't even have to talk about social media this much. But social media is the most powerful medium of communication in the modern world. It's not Fox News, it's not CNN, it's not your local newspaper, it's not the New York Times. The most powerful and influential way of communication now is podcasting and social media influence. For better or worse. That comes with benefits, but it comes with a lot of dangerous territory at the same time. Jimmy Akin with Catholic Answers came out with a very, very good video a few days ago. entitled Racism is Evil. I was impressed with that video. His narrative of the American Civil War was very good. And his explanation as to why racism is wrong was even better. There's one human race. That's it. There are different cultures. There are different backgrounds, different national histories. There's only one human race. Nothing in Scripture, nothing within the history of the church says anything otherwise. And so I am not in favor of the history of racism that is not only a part of Southern history, but also a part of American history, also a part of Western civilization history. You cannot say that the South is evil because there are racists within its history. Wherever you are in America, in North America, in South America, in Europe, wherever you are in most parts of the world, in fact, some type of racism existed at one point. But it does exist in the South. I remember talking to a man in Alabama years ago who told me that when he looks into the eyes of a black man, he doesn't see a soul. He sees nothing. I was offended greatly by that statement. I had a gentleman emailed me not long ago who is a farmer and who tried to argue and make the point to me that the Catholic Church is the only true church and that, here's the main point, it was created for white people only. It's laughable that somebody would believe that. But it's real. Racism is real. It's still in America and it still exists in other parts of the world. But don't tell me that I am one of these people because I believe that there are different ways of looking at history. There are genuinely important perspectives from people who lived long before us that we need to pay attention to. It's astonishing that there is actually a movement in this country to destroy the vision of the founding generation of Americans because they didn't stop slavery with the creation of the Constitution. Jefferson, Washington, many of the founders themselves were slaveholders. And that, in and of itself, is all that many people in this country want to know about the founders. Well, they were slaveholders, so why do we need to pay attention to what they had to say? It's far, far more complicated than that. For one, you have to realize that most people who were slaveholders, they didn't know what to do about the future of the institution. What they thought about government, what they thought about religion, etc., oftentimes contradicted the notion of having a slave-holding republic. The fact was not lost on them. It was not lost on them. I'll go back to Jefferson Davis again. In his Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government, written after the war, Davis articulated that if slavery had not already been introduced to the generation that lived through the Confederacy, they would not have introduced slavery to this country. Many people knew that it was a problem. Many people knew that it wouldn't last forever. There was a very unfair and troublesome article published by the American Thinker, an online conservative magazine, I guess is what you would call it, just a day or two ago, comparing the 1861 Confederacy to modern-day Democrats. There is no comparison. The Confederate Constitution is modeled after the United States Constitution. The Confederate founders knew that they were making every attempt they could to preserve the founders' original meaning of the 1787 Constitution. But yet, we have people who are gaining publications in rather well-known circles who are comparing the 1861 Confederate founders to the current Democrat Party. There is no comparison. The current Democrat Party doesn't care about the Constitution. They do not care about the founding generation of this country. They do not care about the people who vote for the party. They care about power. Whatever is necessary to maintain power. This country's gotten too big for its britches. And the South remains an anchor, pulling it back to a more traditional view of who we are. It's always been that way. The South has always been the traditional anchor. The anchor that pulls people back. Say, wait a minute now, we're going in a little bit difficult direction. We need to hang on. We need to just think about this. Change is not reform, as John Randolph of Roanoke once said. Change is sometimes necessary, but it needs to be done slowly, incrementally, with prudence. But you're blinded to all of those lessons from Southern history if all you want to talk about is slavery and racism. I made a short the other day explaining that the Civil War has never ended. Got a little feedback on that, got a little pushback. And I received a very, very good comment. Somebody simply wanting me to explain more. It wasn't an ugly comment. It wasn't unusual. It was just, tell me more. And so basically what I said was the issue of federalism and limited government didn't go away with the end of the Civil War. Slavery did. Racism didn't. Actually, there's a strong argument to be made that Reconstruction and the years after the war made racism very serious and more of a problem in America than anything that ever existed prior to 1861. But the issue of federalism and limited government is still with us now. Those issues have never been resolved. We still deal with them. The Constitution did not say in the 1860s, and it does not say now, that a state does not have the right to withdraw from the federal union if it decides to do so. Jefferson Davis wanted this issue to go before the federal courts after the war. The federal government would not allow it. They put him in prison for 2 years. The legal question at hand when the South seceded from the Union was, do the several states have the right to secede if they want to, or is that treason? Are they required to remain in the Union perpetually? Nothing in American history up until that time suggested that the states were required to remain in the Union perpetually. Only random arguments from U.S. senators argued in favor of a perpetual union. There was no law that said that it was perpetual. Several of the states, when they ratified the Constitution, first of all in the 1780s, made it very clear through their ratification conventions that if this union of states at some point stops serving the purposes for which it was originally created, then the states maintain the right to withdraw. And that is still not an issue that has ever been amended in the Constitution. Actually, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution is very clear. All powers not delegated by the people, that is, the people of the several states, to the federal government, remain with the states. But we have this image today of the United States as being a single unified country. Had another fellow leave a comment on a video I did recently, said, Dude, yeah. I'm a great fan of yours. Well, that's good. I appreciate that. But you need to get over the fact that y'all lost the war. It's over. We're one unified country. And he also suggested that the Constitution is no longer doing its job. Well, that's not my fault that the Constitution isn't doing its job. But I can tell you this, without that Constitution, you have no country, unified or otherwise. You have no country. So there's more to the story of American history than what meets the eye. There's more than what you, and this goes for probably most of you who are listening to this, there's more to American history than what you were taught in school and in college, wherever you learned about it. Just because you are for one thing doesn't mean that you're against something else. Thus, just because you believe in one thing doesn't automatically mean excuse me, that you believe in everything about that particular movement or that particular issue. It would have been better if the Confederacy itself had abolished slavery before the war started. They didn't do it. But that doesn't change the fact that the states had every right to withdraw from the Union. There's no legal precedent, there's no law that says they don't. The very nature of the Union is that of a voluntary union of states. That's how it came into existence in the first place. Why does that matter for us today? It matters because you don't have to live in a continental nation with states that are fundamentally opposed to a moral order. I have often said that if California and New York seceded from the Union as blue states, the rest of us will be a whole lot better off. You're not going to make this entire country from coast to coast think as one ever again. It will never happen. It never happened to begin with. There has never been one single unified American people, regardless as to what Mark Levin and David, what is that dude's name? Hanson have to say about it on Fox News. People are listening to Hanson as if he's the god of American history. He's a neocon. He's a Bushite. He believes in American imperialism. He's from California, so why should I expect anything else? I've got a lot that I want to say on the issue because the American South is trying to, there is a Southern tradition that nobody wants to pay attention to because they don't want to be labeled a racist. Well, forget about that. If you're worried about what everybody else is going to think, if you begin an intellectual journey down a road that's going to teach you some things, Signpost in a Strange Land, to use a title from Walker Percy's book. If you want to go down that road, you cannot be concerned with what other people think. There is no unified American people. You are not going to convince the cities and the blue counties that conservatism, that anything traditional, that morality is important. You're not going to do it. And all this talk about there being a new spiritual revival in America since Charlie Kirk's assassination is a bunch of nonsense. There is no spiritual revival. The nation remains in moral decline. If that is to be turned around, it's going to take a very long period of time. And what can you do about it? Start realizing in your own mind that there is something valuable about American history and nobody wants to tell you about it. You got to figure it out for yourself. Because the history profession is highly agenda driven. I'm going to wrap this up. I've been talking long enough, but just some random ideas, some rambling for you to perhaps enjoy. This is Alan Harrelson with the Pipe Cottage. Thank you for stopping by.